History is written by the winners, but sometimes the truth leaks out. May 14th. A date that appears ordinary in the history books. A governor signs paperwork in New York, creating what would become one of the most powerful foundations on earth. Across the Pacific, a nation votes on its very constitution. And in Salem, yes, Salem, the last witchcraft trial in American history quietly begins. 3 events. 3 continents. 3 stories the official record wants you to accept at face value. But what if I told you these moments share something deeper? That beneath the signatures, the votes, and the courtroom testimony lies a pattern most people never notice? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on May 14th, but what if I told you that the largest act of philanthropy in American history was actually approved by a governor who would be impeached just months later, in a political war orchestrated by the very machine that man was trying to destroy? The official story goes like this. On May 14, 1913, New York Governor William Sulzer signed a charter creating the Rockefeller Foundation, backed by an unprecedented $100 million from the world's richest man, John D. Rockefeller. The stated mission was noble, to promote the well-being of humanity around the world. Newspapers celebrated it as the dawn of modern philanthropy. But behind closed doors, something far more calculated was unfolding. Here's what the history books leave out. John D. Rockefeller had been trying to get this foundation chartered for years. Congress had rejected him twice. Federal lawmakers didn't trust his motives, and frankly, neither did the American public. Standard Oil had just been broken up by the Supreme Court in 1911. Rockefeller was seen as a robber baron, not a humanitarian. So he pivoted. If Washington wouldn't give him legitimacy, New York would. Enter William Sulzer, a reform-minded governor who had just taken office promising to fight Tammany Hall, the corrupt democratic political machine that had helped elect him. Sulzer was an idealist, and he signed the Rockefeller Charter believing in its stated purpose. But here's where it gets dark. Within months of approving that charter, Sulzer found himself under impeachment proceedings. Tammany Hall boss Charles Murphy turned on him with a vengeance. The charges? Campaign finance violations. Sulzer became only the second governor in New York history to be removed from office. His political career was destroyed. Now, there's no direct evidence that Rockefeller orchestrated Sulzer's downfall. But consider this. The foundation received its charter during the exact window when Sulzer was politically vulnerable, desperate for allies, and willing to approve business-friendly measures. Rockefeller's team had spent years cultivating relationships across New York's political landscape. They knew timing was everything. What emerged from that 1913 charter would go on to shape global health policy, fund the Green Revolution, and influence medical research for over a century. The Rockefeller Foundation helped eradicate hookworm, funded the creation of penicillin, and established schools of public health worldwide. But its origin story remains a masterclass in how the ultra-wealthy navigate political chaos to build permanent institutions of power. While a reform governor burned, a dynasty secured its legacy forever. The next time someone tells you philanthropy exists outside politics, remember William Sulzer. Remember 1913. And remember that the biggest donations in history. What if I told you that the birth certificate of Philippine democracy was signed under the watchful eye of an empire that never intended to let go? May 14, 1935. The official story reads like a triumph. Nearly 2 million Filipinos cast their votes, and an overwhelming 96% said yes to a brand new constitution. Finally, after centuries of Spanish rule and decades of American occupation, the Filipino people had spoken. They had chosen their own destiny. Democracy had arrived in Southeast Asia. At least, that's what the textbooks want you to believe. But here's what they don't tell you. That constitution, the one Filipino supposedly wrote for themselves, had to pass through the hands of the United States Congress before a single Filipino could even vote on it. President Franklin Roosevelt himself had to approve it. And buried in the document's provisions was a 10-year countdown, a transition period where America would maintain military bases, control Philippine trade, and retain the power to intervene in Filipino affairs whenever it deemed necessary. The Constitution wasn't a declaration of independence. It was a leash disguised as liberty. And it gets more troubling. That 96% approval rating? Consider this. The vote happened under the supervision of American colonial authorities. Opposition voices, particularly those advocating for immediate and complete independence, found themselves marginalized. Labor leaders and peasant organizers who questioned the arrangement faced surveillance and suppression. The Sactalista uprising, a revolt against American rule, had been crushed just days before the vote. Thousands of Filipinos who wanted true independence, not this gradual handover, were silenced through force. The man who would become president under this new constitution, Manuel Quezon, privately admitted the uncomfortable truth. He once reportedly said he would prefer a government run like hell by Filipinos to one run like heaven by Americans. But in 1935, what Filipinos got was something in between, a government run by Filipinos but designed in Washington. The economic provisions locked the Philippines into dependency. American goods flooded Philippine markets duty-free while Philippine exports faced restrictions. American corporations maintained their grip on Philippine resources. The Constitution enshrined not sovereignty but a carefully managed transition that protected American interests. So why does this matter 90 years later? Because the patterns persist. The military bases remained for decades. The economic ties endured. And the fundamental question, who truly writes a nation's destiny, still haunts former colonies worldwide. The 1935 Constitution wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. It was democracy with an asterisk, freedom with fine print, independence on layaway. What if I told you that America's last witchcraft trial had nothing to do with broomsticks, black cats, or dancing in the woods? That it happened not in colonial times, but during the age of the telephone and the steam engine. And that the real story behind it reveals a bitter war between two people who once called each other allies? The official version goes something like this. In May 1878, nearly 200 years after the infamous Salem witch trials, another courtroom in the same Massachusetts town heard accusations of dark mental powers. Lucretia Brown, a devout follower of the new Christian Science movement, claimed that a man named Daniel Spofford was using his mind to attack her from a distance. She said he was causing her physical suffering through sheer mental manipulation. The judge ultimately threw the case out, calling it impossible to prove. And history recorded it as a bizarre footnote, a strange echo of superstition in the modern age. But here is what the history books leave out. Daniel Spofford was not some random stranger accused of witchcraft. He was a former Christian Science practitioner himself, trained directly by Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of the entire movement. And Lucretia Brown was not acting alone. She was closely connected to Eddy's inner circle at the exact moment when Eddy was waging war against her former student. You see, Spofford had broken from Eddy's organization. He had started practicing independently, and worse, he had aligned himself with another former student who was publishing rival teachings. Eddy believed deeply in what she called malicious animal magnetism, the idea that hostile thoughts could cause real physical harm across any distance. And she believed her enemies were using it against her. The witchcraft accusation against Spofford was not medieval superstition. It was a weapon in a very modern religious power struggle. Brown's lawsuit gave Eddy's movement a legal platform to establish mental attack as a real, prosecutable offense. If the court had ruled in Brown's favor, it would have legitimized Eddy's entire theology of mental warfare. The case collapsed. The judge refused to entertain something so impossible to measure. But the damage to Spofford's reputation was done. This matters because it shows us how accusations of invisible harm, whether we call it witchcraft or mental manipulation, have always been tools of power. They silence rivals. They punish those who leave the group. And they thrive in moments when institutions are fighting for control. The last witch trial in America was not a ghost of the past. So there you have it, a governor's signature unleashing billions in Rockefeller money, a nation forging its destiny through the ballot box, and believe it or not, witch trials still haunting American courtrooms well into the modern age. Which of these secrets shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments below, I'm dying to know. And if you want more hidden history like this delivered fresh every single day, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss what they didn't teach you in school. Until next time, keep digging.